The tall glass building of Anderson Global Tower stood in the middle of the busy city, shining in the early sunlight. Every morning, hundreds of employees rushed inside with their coffee cups, briefcases, and fast steps, ready to begin another day of work. But before any of them arrived, when the air was still quiet and the hallways were empty, a man named David was already there, moving slowly with his cleaning cart. David was the janitor of the building. He had worked there for many years, quietly sweeping the floors, wiping down desks, and making sure everything looked perfect before the executives arrived. His job was not glamorous, but he took pride in doing it well. David was a humble man in his late 40s, wearing a faded uniform and carrying tired eyes. Yet he had a gentle smile that showed he was kind-hearted. Every day, before the employees filled the building with noise and tension, he had company, his young daughter Lena. She was only 12 years old, a slim girl with bright brown eyes and long hair tied in a neat braid. She often came with him in the mornings because David could not afford daycare, and he trusted no one else to take care of her. Lena never complained. She would sit quietly in the corner of the lobby with her small notebook, scribbling words and sentences while her father worked. Sometimes she copied words from a book. Sometimes she drew small sketches of things she saw. People who passed by early in the morning rarely noticed her. To them, she was just the janitor's daughter, quiet, ordinary, and invisible in the world of business suits and office meetings. But Lena was not ordinary. Her father knew she was different, though even he did not fully realize the extent of her gift. She loved learning languages. Ever since she was very small, she had shown an interest in words. She picked up sounds quickly, repeated phrases after hearing them once, and filled her notebooks with vocabulary in different tongues. She had no formal teacher, but she listened to online recordings, borrowed library books, and practiced by herself. That particular morning began like any other. David polished the marble floors in the lobby while Lena sat by the big window, her notebook on her lap. She was writing a sentence in French when a delivery man entered the building, pushing a trolley filled with boxes. He greeted her casually in English, but when he dropped a package, he muttered under his breath in French. Without thinking, Lena replied in perfect French, telling him she could help if he needed assistance. The delivery man looked shocked for a moment but smiled gratefully and responded to her. David, still working nearby, glanced up and shook his head with a small smile. He had grown used to moments like these, though he always worried people might think it strange. Still, he was proud that his daughter had such talent. What no one realized was that someone else had overheard the short exchange. The CEO of the company himself. Mr. Anderson had just stepped into the building, briefcase in hand, walking with his usual firm stride. He was a tall man in his early 50s, known for his sharp eyes and serious face. His employees often described him as strict, focused, and a man who did not waste time on unnecessary things. He was respected but also feared. Mr. Anderson rarely noticed the janitor or his daughter. His world revolved around meetings, contracts, and profits. But that morning, as he walked past the lobby, he heard Lena's fluent French. He stopped mid-step, surprised. The words flowed from her mouth with the ease of a native speaker. Curious, he turned his head and observed quietly for a moment. Lena was now speaking in English again, thanking the delivery man. But then another worker entered, this time an IT technician originally from Germany. He greeted David politely, and Lena, without hesitation, greeted him in German. Her words were smooth, her accent precise. The technician laughed in surprise, and the two exchanged a few sentences. Mr. Anderson's sharp eyes widened slightly. He was not easily impressed, but what he had just witnessed was no small trick. This girl, the janitor's daughter, had spoken in 2 foreign languages within minutes, with confidence and fluency. For the first time, he looked directly at David and Lena, not as a CEO glancing at a janitor, but as a man intrigued by something unusual. He stepped forward. David noticed him immediately and straightened, nervously gripping his cleaning rag. He was always careful around the CEO, afraid of losing his job if he ever made a mistake. "Good morning, sir," David said respectfully. Mr. Anderson nodded slightly, his eyes still on Lena. "What is your daughter's name?" he asked. David hesitated, unsure why the CEO was suddenly interested. "This is Lena, sir," he replied quietly. Mr. Anderson crouched down slightly so that he was at eye level with the girl. "Lena," he said in his deep voice, "did I hear you speaking French just now?" Lena looked up shyly but nodded. Yes, sir. Say something in French to me, he asked. His tone was not unkind but commanding, as though he expected obedience. Without hesitation, Lena said a polite phrase, introducing herself in flawless French. Her pronunciation was clear, her confidence steady. Mr. Anderson blinked, then switched. Do you know Spanish? He asked suddenly. Lena smiled a little and answered his question in Spanish, speaking about the weather and her morning. The janitor's heart raced. He did not know what was happening, and he feared his daughter might be drawing too much attention. Yet at the same time, he could not stop feeling proud. Mr. Anderson stood slowly, his face unreadable. Around them, a few employees who had arrived early had begun to gather, whispering among themselves. They had never seen the CEO give such attention to anyone outside the executive team, let alone a janitor's child. What other languages can you speak? Mr. Anderson asked after a pause. Lena tilted her head thoughtfully and began listing them. German, Italian, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic. She said a sentence in each, her voice calm and precise. The small crowd grew, jaws dropping as they listened. Employees exchanged looks of disbelief. A girl so young, so unnoticed every day in the lobby, was speaking languages most of them could not understand. The atmosphere shifted. The quiet lobby was no longer ordinary. It felt like something remarkable was unfolding. People who had never noticed Lena before were now staring at her with wide eyes, whispering to each other about how unbelievable it was. Mr. Anderson finally crossed his arms, deep in thought. His expression was serious, but inside his mind a new idea was forming. He realized at that moment that this was no coincidence. This was talent, real rare talent, and it had been sitting quietly in his building every morning, unseen by all. David looked worried. He lowered his voice and said, Sir, she's just a child. Please don't be upset with her. She only likes to learn. But Mr. Anderson did not look upset. His sharp eyes softened just a little as he turned to David. Upset? He said firmly. No, Mr. David, I am impressed. Those words shocked David more than anything. Impressed? The CEO, a man who rarely complimented even senior executives, had just admitted admiration for his daughter. Employees in the lobby fell silent, sensing something unusual was about to happen. The CEO had noticed someone invisible, and that single moment was about to change everything. The quietness in the lobby did not last for long. As more employees walked through the glass doors, they noticed a strange scene. The CEO, who was usually the most serious and untouchable man in the building, was standing in front of the janitor's daughter, speaking to her directly. People slowed their steps, curious, whispering to one another as they tried to understand what was happening. The janitor, David, stood nervously beside his cleaning cart, twisting his cap in his hands while Lena looked calm. Her bright eyes filled with innocence. Mr. Anderson was still curious and wanted to test her further. He had traveled widely for business, meeting clients from different parts of the world, and he knew enough to recognize real fluency when he heard it. He leaned slightly closer, his sharp eyes narrowing with interest. Lena, do you know German? He asked. Without hesitation, Lena switched to German, greeting him formally and then speaking about how she was happy to meet him. Her words were clear, and her accent sounded exactly like the clients he had worked with from Berlin and Munich. A murmur spread across the lobby as a German-born IT worker stepped forward. She speaks it perfectly, the man confirmed, a smile on his face. Her accent is even better than mine after living here so long. The crowd of onlookers grew bigger. Secretaries, accountants, and even security guards gathered quietly around, drawn in by the unusual scene. Everyone wanted to hear more. Mr. Anderson, still not satisfied, crossed his arms. What about Mandarin? He asked, remembering a particularly challenging negotiation he once had in Beijing. He doubted she could know it. But Lena looked thoughtful, then spoke in soft, rhythmic Mandarin. Her tones were careful but correct, her sentences simple yet fluent. A woman from the finance department, who was originally from Shanghai, gasped in surprise. She speaks it very well, the woman exclaimed. I can understand her clearly. This is unbelievable. David felt sweat forming on his forehead. He was proud, but he also worried. He had never wanted to draw attention to himself or his daughter. They lived a simple life, and he believed that blending into the background was safer. But here, in front of the CEO and dozens of employees, Lena's talent was no longer hidden. It was shining brighter with every passing second. Mr. Anderson nodded slowly, his face serious. Try Arabic, he said next. Without blinking, Lena began to speak Arabic. The sound of her words rolled smoothly from her tongue. A security guard who came from Egypt stepped forward with wide eyes. She just said she is pleased to meet us all, he explained, his voice filled with amazement. Her pronunciation is, it's very close to native. The small crowd gasped again. People exchanged looks of disbelief. Some pulled out their phones to record, though they hesitated, unsure if the CEO would allow it. Everyone was talking in hushed voices, asking how a janitor's daughter could possibly know so many languages. Mr. Anderson's face remained unreadable, but his mind was racing. He had expected perhaps a trick or a few memorized phrases, but this was no trick. The girl had just spoken fluently in multiple world languages, shifting smoothly between them as though it were the easiest thing in the world. He felt as though he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. He raised a hand to silence the whispers around him. The crowd quieted, eager to hear what would happen next. He looked down at Lena again, his voice softer now, almost curious. Tell me, Lena, how many languages do you actually know? The girl looked down at her notebook for a moment, then counted silently on her fingers. 9, she said simply, her voice gentle. I can speak 9. 9. The number struck everyone like a thunderclap. A collective gasp filled the lobby. Even the employees who had just arrived froze where they stood, realizing they were witnessing something unforgettable. Mr. Anderson studied her face carefully. She was not boasting. There was no pride or arrogance in her voice. She had said it as if it was the most natural thing in the world, like someone saying they could ride a bike or tie their shoes. That honesty made her words even more powerful. The CEO turned slightly, signaling to one of the senior managers who had just arrived. Call in the staff members who speak other languages, he instructed. Bring them here now. The manager hurried away, and within minutes several employees who came from different parts of the world gathered in the lobby. A woman from Italy stepped forward first, greeting Lena in Italian. The girl's face lit up as she responded fluently, asking how she was and commenting on the weather. The woman laughed in amazement and clapped her hands. Next, a man from Moscow approached, speaking in Russian. Lena answered in Russian without hesitation, asking him politely if he worked in the building. The man's eyes went wide. Her Russian is excellent, he exclaimed, shaking his head in disbelief. Then came a man from Brazil who tested her in Portuguese. Again, Lena answered with perfect ease, making him grin in astonishment. Finally, another woman spoke to her in Japanese, and though Lena's Japanese was less fluent than the others, she still managed to introduce herself with clarity. By now, the lobby was completely filled. Employees crowded around the glass walls, peeking in from the hallways, trying to see what was happening. The janitor's daughter had turned the entire building's attention onto her. It felt as though time had stopped, and everyone was watching history unfold inside their own office. David stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. His heart pounded with a mix of pride and fear. He had always known his daughter was talented, but he had never imagined the CEO himself would discover it. What if this brought trouble? What if people thought she was showing off? He wanted to protect her, to keep her safe from the harshness of the world. But Lena stood calmly beside him, her small figure unshaken, her voice steady as she answered question after question. She looked so confident, so comfortable, as though she belonged in that moment. David realized, perhaps for the first time, that his daughter's light was too bright to be hidden forever. Mr. Anderson finally raised his hand again. The room fell silent instantly. He looked at Lena with a mixture of awe and respect. That is enough, he said in his commanding tone. He turned to face the crowd of employees. What you have all seen today is real talent, and it is standing here in front of us, not in a university or a boardroom, but in the daughter of our janitor. A wave of murmurs filled the room, people nodding, some even applauding quietly. They had never seen the CEO speak like this before. His words carried weight, and his acknowledgement of a janitor's child stunned everyone. David looked down, his throat tight. He whispered to his daughter, Lena, maybe we should go. But before he could guide her away, Mr. Anderson placed a firm hand on his shoulder. No, he said calmly. You both will come with me. There is something we must discuss, And with that, the CEO of the company led the janitor and his daughter through the crowd, toward his glass-walled office on the top floor. Employees parted like waves, whispering in shock. Nobody had ever seen such a thing before. The moment felt electric, like the beginning of a story people would tell for years. And for the first time, the janitor and his daughter were no longer invisible. They had captured the attention of everyone, and what would happen next nobody could predict. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. David stood stiffly, clutching his cap in both hands, his heart beating fast. He could not believe what had just happened in the lobby. His daughter, the little girl who had always been invisible, in this tall building, had become the center of attention in front of the CEO and dozens of employees. He worried about what this might mean for them. Was this a mistake? Had Lena drawn too much notice? He feared that one wrong impression could cost him his job, and his job was all they had to survive. Lena, on the other hand, stood calmly by her father's side. She held her small notebook close to her chest, her eyes curious as they rose higher and higher. She had never been to the top floor before, and everything felt new and exciting. Unlike her father, she did not feel fear. She only felt wonder at being noticed at last. When the elevator doors opened, Mr. Anderson led them down a quiet hallway. The carpet was thick, the air smelled faintly of polished wood, and the walls were decorated with expensive paintings. This was a world far away from the janitor's closet in the basement where David kept his tools. The CEO's office was at the end of the hall, a large room with tall glass windows that looked out over the entire city. "Please sit," Mr. Anderson said firmly as he stepped behind his desk. David hesitated. He had never been invited into such a room before. His hands trembled as he pulled out a chair for his daughter, and then sat down himself. Lena slid into her seat gracefully, her eyes wandering across the huge bookshelves, the shining desk, and the framed photographs of Mr. Anderson shaking hands with world leaders and business giants. The CEO sat back in his chair, folding his hands. For a long moment, he studied Lena silently, his sharp eyes observing her as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. David cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, I apologize if my daughter caused any distraction. She's only a child who enjoys learning. Please don't hold this against her. I promise she didn't mean to." Mr. Anderson raised his hand to silence him. "Mr. David," he said in his deep, commanding voice, "do you think I am upset?" David swallowed hard. "I don't know, sir. You are the boss. I don't want any trouble." The CEO leaned forward slightly, his tone firm but not harsh. "Trouble? What I saw today was not trouble. It was brilliance." David blinked in shock, not sure if he had heard correctly. Brilliance? His daughter? Mr. Anderson turned his attention back to Lena. 9 languages, is that correct? Lena nodded shyly. "Yes, sir." "How did you learn them?" he asked. She hugged her notebook closer. "From books, from the library, from recordings online. Sometimes I listen to people talk and I copy the way they sound. I practice every day." Her answer was simple, but her tone carried quiet determination. She did not boast, she did not act proud. She just spoke the truth. Mr. Anderson sat back, silent again, his mind working quickly. For years, his company had struggled with international negotiations. Hiring translators was expensive, and sometimes they failed to capture the true meaning of clients' words. But here was a child, the daughter of his janitor, who could switch between languages as easily as someone might switch between songs on a radio. Finally, he spoke. "Lena, would you like to help me with something important?" Lena looked at her father nervously, and David immediately shook his head. "Sir, she's only a child. She shouldn't be burdened with work. Please, she is not ready for anything like that." But Mr. Anderson's eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "I am not asking her to do heavy work. I am asking her to use her gift. Mr. David, do you understand what kind of talent your daughter has? Most adults study their whole lives and cannot master even 2 languages. She has mastered 9. That is not something you hide. That is something you nurture." David felt torn. He wanted to protect his daughter from the world, but he also knew deep down that Mr. Anderson was right. Lena's gift was rare. He had always believed she was special, but he had never imagined anyone else would recognize it. "What exactly are you saying, sir?" David asked carefully. Mr. Anderson leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I am saying I want your daughter to help this company. We deal with international clients every day. If she can assist us even in small ways, she can make a difference. In return, I will ensure she receives the best education available. I will personally cover her school fees, her books, and everything else she needs to grow. I will not allow this kind of brilliance to fade away in the shadows." The words hit David like a storm. Education? Covered by the CEO himself? He had struggled for years to provide Lena with even the most basic schooling. Many nights he lay awake, wondering how he could ever give her the future she deserved. And now, suddenly, the most powerful man in the building was offering her an opportunity beyond his imagination. David's voice trembled. "Sir, I don't know what to say. This is too much." Mr. Anderson's tone grew even firmer. "It is not too much. It is the right thing. Talent is not meant to be hidden in the corner of a lobby. Talent like this must shine, and I intend to make sure it does." Lena looked up at her father with wide eyes. She whispered softly, "Papa, maybe this is good. Maybe I can learn more. Maybe I can help you too." Her words pierced his heart. He saw the hope in her eyes, the quiet dream she had always carried but never dared to voice. She wanted more than the four walls of their small apartment, more than the quiet mornings in the lobby. She wanted to grow. Tears welled in David's eyes, though he tried to hide them. He had always dreamed of giving her more, but he never had the means. Now fate had placed an open door in front of them. Mr. Anderson stood suddenly, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the room. "It is decided," he said firmly. "From this day forward, Lena will be given the resources she needs. She will help us with languages when required, but most importantly, she will receive the education she deserves. I will not hear another word of refusal." David opened his mouth to protest again, but the CEO's commanding tone left no room for argument. The man was used to making decisions that changed lives, and this was one of them. At that moment, a knock came at the door. A senior executive entered hesitantly. "Sir, there's an early call with our partners in Milan. They are already on the line." Mr. Anderson glanced at Lena, then back at the executive. A thought struck him. "Bring the call here," he ordered. The executive looked surprised but obeyed, setting up the video conference on the large screen in the office. Soon the faces of Italian partners filled the display. They began speaking in rapid Italian, their expressions showing frustration about a miscommunication in a contract. Mr. Anderson looked at Lena. "Can you handle this?" he asked quietly. David froze. "Sir, please, she's only a child. Don't put her in such a position." But Lena straightened her shoulders. She nodded. "I can try." With calm confidence, she stepped forward and greeted the Italians in fluent Italian. The men on the screen blinked in surprise, then broke into wide smiles. She listened carefully to their concerns and translated them clearly for Mr. Anderson. Then she took his responses and conveyed them back with grace and accuracy. Within minutes, the tense misunderstanding melted away. The partners laughed, relaxed, and agreed to continue the deal. The call ended on a positive note, leaving the executives stunned. The office fell silent. David's mouth hung open, unable to process what had just happened. His daughter had not only spoken like a professional, but she had just saved an important business conversation in front of the CEO himself. Mr. Anderson's stern face softened into the faintest smile. He stood tall, looking down at Lena with respect. "You did well," he said. His deep voice carried not just approval, but genuine admiration. The employees who had gathered outside the glass walls whispered in awe. They had just witnessed something none of them would ever forget. A janitor's daughter stepping into a world far beyond her reach and holding her ground with brilliance. For the first time in years, David felt his chest fill with pride so strong it erased his fear. He realized that this was not trouble. This was destiny, and the whole office knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days in the office felt very different from before. People who once walked past David without even noticing him now slowed their steps to greet him politely. Secretaries who had never spoken to Lena before now stopped to ask her questions, sometimes even just to hear her reply in a different language. The quiet little girl who used to sit in the lobby unnoticed had become the most talked about person in the entire building. At first, David felt uncomfortable. He was not used to this sudden attention. For years he had lived in the shadows, quietly pushing his cleaning cart and keeping his head low. Now people looked at him with respect, sometimes even with admiration, and he did not know how to respond. He still wore the same old uniform, still polished the same floors, but everything felt different because of the way others now saw him. Lena, however, adapted quickly. She was still the same gentle girl, carrying her notebook wherever she went. But her days were no longer spent sitting quietly in the lobby. Mr. Anderson had arranged for her to have a small workspace on one of the higher floors. It was not an office, but it had a desk, a computer, and shelves filled with books in different languages. To Lena, it felt like a dream. She spent hours reading, practicing, and learning even more words. Employees often visited her desk, bringing her letters, emails, or short passages in foreign languages to test her. Some came with French memos, others with Chinese business notes, and still others with Spanish reports. Lena handled each one calmly, explaining the meaning in simple English. Her accuracy left everyone stunned. Soon her help went beyond simple tasks. One day an important video call was scheduled with clients from Brazil. The official translator was late and the executives panicked. Someone suggested calling Lena, and within minutes she arrived. She greeted the clients in Portuguese, and the tense atmosphere melted into laughter and friendliness. The meeting was a success, and afterward, the executives could not stop praising her. Word spread even faster after that. By the end of the week, Lena's name was being whispered not only among employees but also in boardrooms. Some of the senior leaders even joked that the company had discovered its secret weapon. They were amazed that a child could perform tasks even trained professionals sometimes struggled with. Mr. Anderson, however, was not joking. He saw Lena's talent as something precious. More than once he reminded his managers, "Do not underestimate what you are seeing. This girl represents potential that money cannot buy." His words carried weight, and soon everyone treated Lena with seriousness and respect. For Lena, the change was exciting but also overwhelming. She was still young, and while she loved learning and helping, she sometimes felt shy when so many adults stared at her. But whenever she looked at her father, who stood proudly in the background, she gained confidence. David's eyes shone with pride every time she spoke, and that gave her the courage to keep going. One afternoon, as Lena was sitting at her desk practicing Mandarin characters, Mr. Anderson walked in unexpectedly. The employees nearby quickly stood up straighter, but he waved them down and approached Lena directly. "Are you enjoying your work here?" he asked. Lena nodded softly. "Yes, sir. I like learning, and I like helping." Mr. Anderson studied her notebook filled with notes in multiple languages. He nodded approvingly. "Good. But remember, Lena, your most important task is not here. It is your education. I want you to grow to have opportunities that others do not. I have already spoken to a private school. You will be enrolled there by next month." David, who had been mopping nearby, froze. He stepped forward quickly. "Sir, please. That is too much. I cannot accept it." But Mr. Anderson turned to him firmly. "This is not charity, Mr. David. This is investment. Your daughter has something rare. If she continues without proper guidance, her gift may not reach its full potential. But with the right training, she could one day stand among the most brilliant minds in the world. Do not deny her that future." David's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, but the determination in the CEO's voice left no space for refusal. For the first time, he realized that someone more powerful than himself truly cared about his daughter's future. From that day forward, Lena began preparing for her new school. Tutors came to the building after office hours, teaching her advanced grammar, pronunciation, and even culture lessons from different countries. Employees often peeked into the room, amazed at the sight of a janitor's daughter being trained like a scholar inside the company tower. The transformation did not stop there. The atmosphere within the building began to shift. People started to treat everyone with more respect, not just Lena. The cleaning staff, security guards, and clerks who had always been invisible suddenly received polite greetings. The story of Lena had opened their eyes. If the janitor's daughter could hold so much brilliance, who was to say that others around them did not also carry hidden gifts? One day, as Lena walked through the hallway holding her notebook, she overheard two employees talking quietly. "She's changed everything," one said. "Even the CEO looks different these days. Softer, more human." "It's true," the other replied. "And to think, we all walked past her for years without noticing." Their words stayed in Lena's heart. She realized that her gift was not only helping her father and the CEO, but also changing how people treated each other. Still, challenges remained. Some employees, though polite on the surface, whispered doubts. "She's just a child," they said. "How long can this last? Surely she will make mistakes." Others felt jealous, wondering why the CEO gave so much attention to a janitor's family. But Mr. Anderson ignored such voices. He believed strongly that what he was doing was right. The biggest change came when Lena was invited to assist in a major board meeting. The company was negotiating with multiple partners from different countries, and communication was complex. Usually, such a meeting required several translators. But that day, Lena sat at the long table beside Mr. Anderson, her notebook open, her hands steady. When the Italian partners spoke, she translated. When the Russian investors asked questions, she explained. When the Chinese executives raised concerns, she responded in Mandarin. Her young voice filled the room with clarity, connecting people who otherwise struggled to understand one another. The board members were astonished. Many of them had doubted at first, but by the end of the meeting, they were nodding with respect. They had witnessed something rare, a young girl guiding adults through a complex negotiation as though she had done it 100 times. That day, Mr. Anderson stood before the board and said firmly, "Remember this moment. Talent can come from anywhere, from any family, from any background. Greatness is not born only in boardrooms or universities. Sometimes it is waiting quietly in the places we least expect." The words struck deeply. The board members exchanged thoughtful glances. They realized their CEO was teaching them more than business. He was teaching them about humanity. When David heard those words, tears filled his eyes. For so long he had feared being looked down upon. Now, because of his daughter, he stood taller. People greeted him with genuine respect, not just as the janitor, but as the father of the girl who had changed their company's heart. And so, day by day, the transformation continued. The office was no longer just a place of strict deadlines and profit-driven meetings. It had become a place where kindness and respect grew stronger, all because a little girl with a notebook had revealed the power of hidden talent. The day of the big meeting arrived, and the entire building felt different. From the lowest clerk to the highest executive, everyone knew something important was about to happen. It was the kind of day that could decide the company's future. The boardroom on the top floor had been prepared for hours, the long, polished table shining under the lights, the large screens ready for video calls, and stacks of documents laid neatly at every chair. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. The company was in the middle of negotiating one of the largest contracts in its history, a deal with multiple international partners. If successful, it would bring millions in profit and expand Anderson Global's reach into new markets. But if it failed, it could cause huge losses and damage the company's reputation. Everyone understood the weight of what was at stake. Mr. Anderson entered the boardroom with his usual firm stride, his presence immediately commanding respect. Behind him, to the surprise of many, walked David and Lena. Employees who were already seated exchanged astonished glances. Some whispered in disbelief, but nobody dared to question the CEO's decision. They had learned by now that Lena was no ordinary child. David felt out of place. He wore his simple janitor's uniform, and as he stepped inside the elegant boardroom filled with powerful men and women in suits, his heart pounded. He wanted to turn back, but Lena's small hand slipped into his, steady and calm. She smiled up at him with confidence. "It's all right, Papa," she whispered softly. "We can do this." Mr. Anderson placed David and Lena in seats close to him. Then he looked around the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice echoing, "today's meeting is critical. We face challenges of language and understanding, but we also have a solution." He glanced at Lena, and for a brief moment his stern face softened. "This young girl has already proven her abilities. Today she will prove them again. Trust her? The executives nodded, though some still looked doubtful. The partners from Italy appeared first on the video screens, speaking quickly and passionately. Their words rolled in fast Italian, their frustration clear. Lena leaned forward, listening carefully, her brow slightly furrowed as she concentrated. Then she translated smoothly into English, her young voice calm and clear. The executives in the room straightened, listening closely. One by one, Lena bridged the gap. The Russian partners spoke next, complaining about unclear terms. Lena responded confidently in Russian, explaining the situation in a way that made them nod with understanding. Then came the Chinese representatives, followed by the team from the Middle East, each with their own concerns. Lena shifted from one language to another without hesitation, her tone respectful, her words precise. The room grew more and more silent. Even the most skeptical board members found themselves staring at her in awe. Here was a 12-year-old girl guiding adults through a storm of complex negotiations, keeping calm where even professionals often stumbled. David sat quietly beside her, his heart swelling with pride and disbelief. He could hardly recognize this confident girl as his little daughter, who once sat quietly in the lobby scribbling in a notebook. She had grown right before his eyes, stepping into a world he never imagined for her. Tears threatened to spill from his eyes, but he held them back, afraid to distract her. As the meeting continued, the tension grew sharper. A misunderstanding arose between the European and Middle Eastern partners, their voices rising, their words heated. The deal was on the verge of collapsing. Executives shifted uncomfortably, some whispering that the agreement might fall apart entirely. At that moment, Mr. Anderson turned his eyes toward Lena. He did not need to say anything. She understood. Taking a deep breath, Lena spoke. She translated each side's concerns carefully, softening the tone, choosing her words with wisdom far beyond her years. She explained the Europeans' position to the Middle Eastern partners, then gently conveyed the other side's perspective. She added respectful phrases showing honor to both groups. Her calm presence slowly eased the tension. The voices on the screen softened. The heated words cooled. Within minutes, the anger melted into reason. The two sides began to listen, not just to argue. Slowly, they came to an understanding. What seemed impossible a few minutes earlier was now within reach. The boardroom sat in stunned silence. Every eye was on Lena. She was not only translating words, she was building bridges. She was not only speaking languages, she was creating peace between people who had nearly walked away from the table. Finally, the partners from all sides agreed. The contract was saved. The deal was signed. The biggest negotiation in the company's history ended in success. For a moment, there was silence in the boardroom. Then, like a wave, applause erupted. Executives clapped loudly, some even standing to honor the girl who had just saved the day. On the video screens, the international partners also smiled and nodded, some applauding from their offices across the world. David sat frozen, unable to move. His heart felt too full. He had never imagined this moment. His daughter, once invisible, had just been the reason powerful men and women found unity. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, no longer caring if anyone saw his tears. Mr. Anderson stood tall beside Lena. When the applause quieted, he spoke in a voice filled with pride. "Today," he said, "we did not only secure a contract, we witnessed something greater. We saw that brilliance can come from unexpected places. We saw that talent is not bound by position, wealth, or status, and we learned that sometimes greatness sits quietly in the corner until given a chance to shine." He turned toward David and Lena. "This girl has taught us all a lesson, and I, for one, will never forget it." The room erupted in applause again, louder than before. Many of the employees looked at Lena with tears in their eyes. For them, it was not just about the contract. It was about hope, about respect, about realizing that everyone, no matter their background, had value. After the meeting ended, people crowded around Lena, thanking her, congratulating her, praising her. David stood close, overwhelmed, unsure how to handle so much attention. But Lena only smiled politely, nodding, her small hands clutching her notebook as if it was her anchor in the storm of praise. When they finally left the boardroom, the hallways were lined with employees who clapped as they walked past. For the first time in his life, David felt what it was like to be seen, truly seen, not as a janitor but as the father of a remarkable girl. That evening, as they walked home together, David placed a hand gently on Lena's shoulder. "You've changed everything," he whispered. Lena looked up at him with her bright eyes. "No, Papa," she said softly. "You gave me the chance. You always let me learn. You believed in me first." David smiled through his tears. In his heart, he knew she was right. He had always done his best to support her, even when all he could give her was an old notebook and encouragement. Now, she had taken those small gifts and turned them into something extraordinary. Back in the office, long after they had gone, employees still spoke about what had happened. They told each other that they had witnessed a miracle that day, and for many of them, it was a reminder to look at the people around them with new eyes, to treat everyone with respect because hidden brilliance might be waiting in the most ordinary of places. And so, the story of the janitor's daughter became legend within the company. People would whisper it to new employees, telling them about the day the office was left speechless. They would say it was not just the day a contract was saved. It was the day they all learned a powerful truth. Greatness has no title, and brilliance needs only one chance to be seen.